Okay, we are running.
We're running?
We are running.
Okay.
Mr. Ryan,
Yep.
could you tell me your name, date of birth, and where you live?
My name is William O'Brien. Usually go by a nickname called Obie O'Brien. And I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. And I live in Houston, Texas. And that's where I'm making my home at this time.
How did you get involved with aviation?
Like most people of that particular vintage, they were airplanes were interesting because they were a little bit of a rarity. There weren't as many of them. So all young people were interested in aviation at that day and time. And there was an example, Skelly Oil Company sponsored Jimmy Allen and flying something on the radio. And you'd make model aircraft as a youngster. Most of them modeled after World War I airplanes. And you'd read the histories of World War I, possibly. And there was an outfit in Tulsa, Oklahoma that manufactured aircraft named Spartan. They ended up with a Spartan School of Aeronautics and a bunch of other things. But anyway, it initially started out, one of the men there in town, a man named Skelly, Bill Skelly, Skelly Oil Company. He started, I understand, Spartan. So when I was a youngster, I'd talk my parents into taking me out there and let me just look at the airplanes and watch the airplanes and things like this. And we had a friend, or I did have a friend who was flying. He would take me out there to the field with him. He would never let me fly in the airplanes with him because they were all student pilots at Spartan. But he didn't want to take the risk is the only reason. So that was my introduction basically to it. And then I became interested in it and watched the, probably some guys that you would have known about. One time I remember an air show came up there. The name of it was the Fordham Brown National Air Show. And I'm not sure, but I think a guy named Tony LaVere was working there as a stunt pilot. And I know there was an old Curtiss Condor. God knows what kind of shape that thing was in or anything about it. That was flown by a man named Chamberlain, who had recently set some kind of a recognizable record. I don't know where it was. Flew to South America or someplace like that. So I went up at night with him, and they cost me $1. And it's the first time I ever got to watch the engines burn at night, you know, and you could see the red flame and stuff like that. Very impressive. Well, I was only, I don't know how old, very young boy. But it was interesting to get a chance to do that. And let's see. Then I always wanted to be in aviation. And there was a military school in the state of Oklahoma, a state school, the Oklahoma Military Academy. Matter of fact, this little hat right here is probably the only memorabilia you'll see out of that place. And this was given to me by a friend of mine. He's a retired colonel. But the Oklahoma Military Academy was a cavalry school. So we started out with hay burners. And they had their own aeronautical division also, which consisted of a couple, 2 or 3 airplanes. And that stuff was very, very quietly sponsored in part by the government because there was a lot of government junk laying around out there. There were some old OX-5 engines and things like this that you tear them apart. And there wasn't enough money being generated by that outfit to keep it going, so some of it had to have some sponsors. And the state of Oklahoma didn't have any money for it either. So, but they had reserve officers, Air Corps reserve officers. 2 of them that I remember very well, Milton Story and a man named Noble Rush. Story was the instructor pilot there when I was there. So I started flying with him at $10 an hour when nobody had $10. so you go mop and sweep and beg, borrow, and steal until you could get enough money to get a little time in. And we were flying a Spartan I'll swear it's either J5 or J something. I don't know what I'm making. But it had about a 200 horse radial engine in it or something like that. And man, that was something. And shortly thereafter, the CPT program was indoctrinated by the federal government. And so I got into that program at the Oklahoma Military Academy. And we started flying 40 horsepower Cubs. And somebody went out and bought a 65 horsepower Cub and brought it in there, and that was a hot rod of the day, you know. The hell of it was, there was a Ryan STA on the premises with the front cockpit closed in. There was an aluminum sheeting that you could put over there and button it down, and it looked more like a fighter than anything else floating around. And but I never got to fly that one. And but I got to learn to fly on the Cubs, and that's the basic interest I had in aviation to start with. And I was very fortunate. You had to have a couple of years of college at that time to get into the Army Air Corps. And I didn't realize what was going on. Most of us didn't, fortunately. What they were really doing, we were all passing the Army 6-4 physical exams. We didn't know it, but that's what they were giving us before they would even look at us to let us into the CPT program.
What was the year?
Sir?
What year was it?
The year for starting that aviation was probably, well, I probably started with Story in 39 and moved over into the CPT program in 40, finished up in 40, I'm pretty sure 40. And then I did not, I had a private pilot's license, that was about it. We didn't have any money, nobody had any money. And I was, went down to school at Stillwater, Oklahoma, after I left the Oklahoma Military Academy. I had 2 years of college, running out of money and running out of intelligence all about the same time. And so I went to work in the oil fields as a roustabout. And then December the 7th came along, and I knew that I didn't want to be in the walking army, and I had been in the horse army, and I thought the air army might be a hell of a lot better deal. So I went down to sign up for the Air Corps, and so I had to go to Fort Riley, Kansas, which was an old cavalry post. And believe it or not, they had a little strip down there, and I think they might have had one airplane on it. I'm not sure. And I went down there to volunteer for Air Corps at that time. And they sent me home to get my teeth fixed, of all things. I got that far into the examination, they sent me home, so I just went home and spent about $100 and some odd to get the fillings fixed up for their purposes, and went back down there after Christmas in 1941. The war started in 1941. And I hung around on that base for 2 or 3 days till somebody found me and told me to go do something. And what they told me to do was go to the KP and start peeling potatoes. And that's exactly the first job I got in the Army. You were enlisted as a private and went on KP, and then came down, and the Air Corps guy, we finished our physical exam. The Air Corps guy, I think he was trying to go he wanted to go someplace. Anyway, he didn't want to stay there. And so he came in and took us through the administrative procedure of migrating from a private to an aviation cadet. It's an appointment at that time. You became appointed as an aviation cadet. And then they started shipping us out to various places. And, in my particular case, I was very lucky. I went to Williams Field. It was just in the process of, carpenters were just about through nailing it together down there at Phoenix. Luke, of course, had been there, was there for quite a while. But I went into Williams and what they were doing, they were staging these people around the country. They didn't know what the hell to do with them. They knew they wanted them. They knew they were going to use them. And they didn't have the facilities rigged up yet to handle them, so they stick you someplace. And Williams was where they stuck us. And all you did is walk around in a circle and drill and clean up an infield. My God, I've never known so much cosmoline in my life could be packed into an infield rifle. But you get it all out of there. And you had those frogs shining on that thing. Hell, you could shave in it. I mean, it was that. And that was to kill time until they could use you for something. And then I went through flying school in Ontario, California. It was a contract flying school.
What date was
This would have to be 1942. The month escapes me because I went in, the class was 42H that I went into. But I never was, in my own mind, I could never make up my mind how that worked. A, B, C, D, E, where do you get to H, huh? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. So it can't be 12 to a year. I don't know how they were phased in there. But anyway, this was Ontario, California. The name of the school was Cal Aero. And it was a contract training program for the Air Corps because they did not have, they didn't have the people, let's face it. They didn't have anybody. And what they had weren't interested in teaching aviation cadets how to fly an airplane. If they were smart, they weren't. And they were smart, so they got out of there. Or they stayed hidden. So they turned it all over to the civilians. Unfortunately for us, the civilian instructors were remarkably high-time guys. And also, what was very good for me as an individual was, hell, I'd come out of some kind of military background. I was trained by Air Corps officers, and you learned Kelly flight pattern the first day you got in a damn Piper Cub. And you'd be surprised how much flying you can learn in the Piper Cub. You can learn a hell of a lot. And so they had Stearmans, with PT-17s, is what we were training in. And the guy that owned that outfit was a guy named Mosley. He was the guy that owned Cal Aero. And C.C. Mosley, I think was his initial. So I became ill at about halfway through primary and was set back for a class, which really didn't bother anything. As far as I was concerned, probably pretty lucky. And they had basic flight school on the same physical installation as the primary. The primary operated, if I remember correctly, on the northern half of that concrete pad, and the basic school ran on the south half of that pad. And it was a pretty good sized piece of concrete poured out there. And it was really, in her day and her time, it was much better than a lot of other things I'd seen short of the old-time, peacetime air bases. They were not temporary shacks. These were permanent buildings, and it was intended to be a good flying school. As a matter of fact, in all probability, it was a good flying school all the time. It was just expanded and made larger by the government grants that supported. And then, let's see, I got out of basic. Basic was taken there, and I went to advanced school at Luke, where all good, honest, single-engine fighter pilots will go to Luke Field. And
Where is this?
Phoenix, Arizona. Still there, still running, still training fighter pilots, as a matter of fact. But in those days, it was advanced because before that, the classical schools had been Randolph and Kelly, and but they couldn't handle what they needed, so they had to move that out, and they did. And they had been kind of lucky. They'd got a very good airplane for advanced, an AT-6, and they had had some experience in running a lot of people through those things, both at Randolph, and the English took over some fields, and they let the English use them for training. They all wasn't done in Canada. A lot of those Canadian boys were down here training in the desert and places like that. And a lot of people don't know that, but that's what happened. Anyway, so that took care of getting out of advanced in AT-6s. And then I migrated on to fighter aircraft from there, and was ordered to the 4th Air Force at Hamilton Field in up north of San Francisco. They call it San Pablo Bay, but it's really just a little hunk of water that washes in there from San Francisco Bay. But it was a real fine old peacetime base, and it was, I really liked that. That was first-class stuff. My personal living quarters were very poor. They were a tar paper shack, but they were just nailing out the one end of it while we were moving into the other end of it. But the permanent barracks parts were still there, and you called upon the group commander with your little card in hand and left it on a silver plate and all this kind of junk. You go to the officers club, you had your own table assignment where you would normally eat if you wished to use or go someplace else, but normally your place would be available. You had a silver ring napkin holder for you. You had your own private hooch locker with your key on it. So you were treated the way you assume an officer in the service of this country would be treated. Now that was about the end of it, but that was, from there on they just put you to work, you see. So anyway, that was more or less the training part of aviation. As I said earlier, you learn a hell of a lot flying a Piper Cub under the right circumstances. And I guess you can develop an equal number of bad habits if you don't have the proper circumstances. The aircraft that we were flying at Hamilton is kind of interesting. That's the only time I ever saw a piece of aircraft that was manufactured in Tulsa show up. And believe it or not, at Hamilton Field one day, a Spartan executive came in there to land, and he landed it just like I thought he would. He flopped all over the damn plane, clang, clang, clang all over it. Finally got it to stop rolling and got out of it. I never did see it leave the ground again. I think that was the end. It was a beautiful looking airplane, you know. It was a really, everybody likes the stagger wing and things like that, but then hell, that Spartan executive was about the same vintage, and I think it was faster aircraft. It was really slick looking little jump. We were flying P-39s, Air Cobras, is what we were checking out there. And they had a 38 outfit on the field also. And strangely enough, a classmate of mine from the Oklahoma Military Academy was flying P-38s at Hamilton when I was checking out in P-39s. And at P-39, well, of course, in those days, checkout was a lot different than what you do today, you know. And I must say that I think today's a lot better way to do it, because they have the luxury of the money and the people and the equipment to do it different. We didn't have that. Did you ever check out in the fighter aircraft yourself? All right. Do you know how they do that stuff?
I know how we do it.
All right. Well, you don't do it the way they did it. They had a pilot's manual, aircraft manual, which, it might be about that thick maybe. It's a regular old notebook. Like the manufacturer makes this, basically he makes the manual, and then it's modified by the Air Corps for their purposes. And they publish the damn thing, the Air Corps does. And you get this book in an airplane. You sit down and read the book and look at the airplane. And you go out and you sit in the cockpit and you find out where all the knobs are and everything like this. And if you've got a buddy, he will come and sit on the wing with you and say, now close your eyes and find the landing gear switch. Or is there a backup? Yeah, there's a backup down here. There's a mechanical wrench on the floor down there. But when you get safe enough to where you thought you could find most of all this stuff with your eyes closed and knew what the proper readings were and everything like that, then the horrible thought is somebody said, well, we better start the engine. So it's chalked down and it's not going anyplace. You start the engine, boy, you got it to run. Okay, good. So now go fly it. Now that's it. I mean, you taxi to the end of the runway down there, you know what you're supposed to do. So we run it up so high and check the mags, things like that. And I'll never forget the first one I flew. Boy, I thought I was real proud of myself. I thought it did real good, you know. I got down to the end of the runway, ran it up, checked it out, and of course it always ran real good. You know, I wouldn't know if it was running bad. I would never have known it anyway. So I poured the coal to it, started down the runway and got off. Boom, I'm off the ground, and man, seeing we're really going. I'm out over San Pablo Bay, and I'd reached over there and flipped the gear, you know, and all that stuff. Got all squared away. I think I got up about 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and it was running along about, I'd say about 180 miles an hour, which didn't seem quite right. Something just, it was much faster than what I was used to, but it still didn't seem right. And I happened to look over there, and it had a couple of trolley tracks down the side over here for the landing gear, the left gear, and the right gear. The nose gear was not counted. But on the tracks, you could tell what the position was by looking over there. And I'd flip that damn landing gear switch from down to neutral. So I would fly around with the gear down. So when I reached around there and kicked the gear back up, you know, I didn't slow the airplane down. I just left it where it was. It hit that. And boy, that gear came up, and man, she hopped up to around about 210, 215, someplace in there. And, you know, man, the old back of the seat wiggled a little bit, you know. I thought I was really doing pretty good. And I'm sure the guys on the ground thought I was doing better because I got the gear up. So that was how you checked out in fighter aircraft. And it never changed all the time after that. Whenever I flew, it never changed. I mean, sometimes you didn't even get a book. You know, somebody just said, well, go down and fly the P-40. You know all about it. We don't need to tell you anything. Well, they're wrong. You don't know all about it. But it all depends on what you think you're going to run into. As to what you do. And let's see. So that was introduction to the P-39, which, as far as I'm concerned, personally, I named an airplane at that time, when I finally got my own airplane later on. I named it Billy's Bitch. And the reason I named it that, because that's exactly what that damn thing was. To fly that airplane, you never trusted it. If you do, you're a dead man. But if you can fly it, then you can fly anything they got coming down the pike. There's no sense in concerning yourself. It can never, nothing will be as dangerous or as unforgiving as a P-39. It's just the way it was. Well, after I got checked out in San Francisco at Hamilton, they, it's kind of interesting. They said they had 3 squadrons. I don't know what the hell they really had. They had one at Hamilton. The guy that checked me out was standing there with a bandage all over the top of his head. You know, he'd run into a revetment. He's a friend of mine. He said, Obie, watch that son of a bitch. It'll kill you. So anyway, that's Hamilton. We had Oakland Municipal Airport. It was a civilian municipal airport, just exactly what it said, except we'd stuck some P-39s over there. And I say stuck them over there. I think we had, if I remember right, at one time we had 5, maybe 5. At the outside 6, but 5 would be a pretty safe bet. And they had some pilots. And they had some pilots stuck down at San Francisco Municipal Airport, which was Mines Field or something like it, Mills Field, something like that. Same thing, about three or four 39s. And they were starting to roll in a bunch of pilots about that time. They were graduating them pretty good. I think at one time, if I'm not mistaken, around Oakland there, we had 4 P-39s, 2 of which are never going to leave the ground because we've dog-robbed everything off of them that could become unbolted to keep the rest of them running, which means we had 2 airplanes that could fly. And I'll swear to God we had 30 or 40 pilots laying around that place. They weren't that way when I first went there. There was only the squadron CO and the operations officer and 2 or 3 other guys like myself that just came in there. That's why I get tickled when I see this Lockheed Lodestar you got out there. There's a good Lodestar story associated with that place. Anyway, you had it worked out, real slick deal. If you flew, say this morning, there's no way you're going to be able to get back in that airplane for about a week. I mean, everybody else is standing in line, they want to fly, so if you wish to, you could take off after you got back on the ground. Hell, nobody knew where the hell you were or what the hell you were doing for a week. You'd go to San Francisco and just horse around, you know. Well, I had a good buddy of mine, his name is Baldy Weisinger, and Baldy and I have to try to fly together and then take off and go run and play. Or Ronnie Brown, a bunch of guys like that. And but that Lockheed story is kind of interesting. A good friend of mine named Clarence Anderson, Bud Anderson. You probably, if you don't know him, you ought to know him. He's just one of the finest pilots the Air Corps ever had. And He's good, very good. Well, he wrote a book, and the name of the book was To Fly and to Fight by Bud Anderson. And strangely enough, Andy was at Oakland at the same time I was. I think we were both there together. Now, just to show you how the insanity that was permeating the Air Corps at that time, the 4th Air Force is sitting over in San Francisco. They say they are. I don't know where the hell they really were. But they had Hamilton. Maybe they had staff in Hamilton. I don't know where they were. But they would have us out there on night missions in P-39s, and they were vectoring me, trying to vector me around the damn bay. Now, the hell of it is, we don't have any signal equipment to vector with. Signal equipment to talk to the tower consists of opening the door and yelling, if you want to be honest about it. But every once in a while, they would get a radio that would work. Most of the time, the radios didn't work. But they would tell you, go up to 6,000 feet and fly around and we'll try to tell you something. Well, you do that. Every once in a while, they'd come through and they'd say, no, go north for a while. They thought they had a Japanese airplane that was launched off a submarine, was coming in the San Francisco Bay Area, flying around the Bay Area at night on photo reconnaissance missions. And we're supposed to catch this damn thing in a P-39 at night? Good luck, my friend. Well, that was one piece of idiocy. And the second one was the time they decided that the Japanese fleet was laying off the coast of California. So they're going to rack up everything they can find around there and send it out. Well, my poor old squadron commander is a nice old boy. He's dead now. His name was Culbertson. And Culbertson could fly that damn Lockheed that you got sitting out yonder. And it had a bomb bay in it, and I think we found some bombs in there. I don't know where the hell they got the bombs. Anyway. The operations officer, unfortunately, was going to fly co-pilot. Now, I'd been up with Cub once in that airplane, just flying around with him, so I knew he could fly it. And so they put Culbertson going to fly it, May's going to fly co-pilot, but he's got to have somebody go with him, and so he picked me. And I didn't know until I read that book that Bud Anderson was the other guy who was stretched out on the ping pong table that night, sleeping on their parachutes, because we're supposed to fly escort for him while he goes out there to drop a bomb on a Japanese fleet. Now, none of us are going to live. I mean, you're not, number one, you ain't going to make the damn mission to begin with, and if you go, you ain't going to get back. So it was really a fiasco, but that was a so-called first mission that I ever heard anything about.
What year was this?
This had to be in '42, yeah. And near as I can tell, it was September, October, November. I don't know how it related with Christmas that year. I really don't. Was it just before Christmas or just after Christmas? And I went from there to, it's another one of those good deals they got, you know. Hell, they had a organization floating around then called Military Air Transport Command, which had service pilots in it. They'd gone around and anybody they could find that could fly an airplane, well, they'd slap a pair of wings on them and some gold bars and put an S in the middle of the wings, and you're a service pilot. And we want you to fly these airplanes at various places. Well, they'd tried flying the 39s coming out of the factory, and they killed so damn many of the service pilots. They said, we're not going to do it anymore. If you want the airplanes, you come and get them and take them to your own outfit. So they told us we were test pilots. We were going back to Buffalo. Well, hell, we weren't testing anything except the weather maybe or something like that. And so we got up there, and here's the P-39s are laying around up there. Want to get them to the, we're trying to get ours to the West Coast is what we were trying to do. And I remember one time we took out of there, I took out with a guy named Cook. He was a first lieutenant. Boy, that was something. You didn't see too many of them. And I'd seen a captain once, and he was first lieutenant. And he's got a unique position in that he's never got to fly very much formation. And I had done quite a bit of formation work. But I hadn't done an awful lot of navigation. He said, good, you navigate and I'll get caught up on formation flying. So that was a good deal, except you start out with 6 airplanes trying to get out from Buffalo to Hamilton Field, California. Well, by the time we got through scattering 39s across the country, we got to Hammer Field, which is down at Fresno, and hell, it's only maybe, 30, 40 minutes flying time up into the Bay Area. They get on the teletype and tell us to turn the damn airplanes around and take them to Middletown, Pennsylvania, to a modification center. Great. So we started back out. But I remember Cook and I got to Middletown, Pennsylvania. And that's the first time I ever flew a 39 with an oil leak so damn bad it scared you half to death. Those things are not supposed to leak anything, nothing. And that one was leaking all over the place. And I told him, just button it up, it's going to go to Middletown. And I wasn't very far from Middletown when I found out I had that. You want to know how I found out I had the oil leak? Okay. I was looking around. We didn't have any ammunition in the wings. We had ammunition cans, but there was nothing in them. So anything we wanted to carry, such as a pair of shorts or a shirt or socks, underwear, anything like that, except a shaving kit, where you put in those ammo cans. And there was you had a little briefcase like this, a pilot's briefcase. You could carry that, and a shaving kit would fit in the cockpit. You could jam them, well, you could put that briefcase down here, but the shaving kit, you stick it up over the 50 calibers right in front of you up there. And I hadn't seen some of this stuff, except when I get on the ground someplace, go out there and open those cans up and reach in there and pull out some stuff. I think it could fold up that parachute bag was practically flat, you know. And so when we got to before I got to Middletown, wherever I made that stop, I started looking for something. I couldn't find it. And so this mechanic opened up the radio compartment in the back of P-39 and threw a flashlight up there. And he said, "You got a hell of an oil leak up here." And I said, "Really?" Yeah, let's take a look at it. So I stuck my head in there and looked. There's my damn Mae West draped around on the control tables. Now this gives you an idea what kind of technical services you're getting for those airplanes. He'd thrown that damn thing up in there. Somebody did someplace. It wasn't out in the gun cans. But it didn't make any difference. I wasn't flying over water anyway, so I never missed it. And I guess the only reason I knew I was going to take it back to the coast with me, and but that was a hell of a place to find it. So anyway, that's one of the stories on 39s. And I left Oakland and went to the 357th Fighter Group, which was forming up at that time. And it was at that's where your good old buddy comes in and he calls you on the telephone because he knows where you're hiding out in San Francisco, and said, "Obie, you better get over here. You're supposed to be up in Tonopah." I said, "What's in Tonopah?" He said, "I don't know, but that's where you're supposed to be." So I go over there, and I got real cagey. I didn't go in to report to the CO. I went into the orderly room. I said, "Where are those orders for O'Brien?" He said, "Here they are." And I said, "Well, I'm here. Give me my orders." He said, "Here you are." And he said, "You got an RT?" I said, "Yeah, I can figure out." RT was a request for transportation, just a little old book. You make it out, and you just fill them out yourself. Wherever you wanted to go, you give one to the airlines if you're going on the airline. But the only way you're going to get to Tonopah is by train. So the 357 Fighter Group had been activated in Hamilton Field and gone to Tonopah to begin their training. And they were bringing up some airplanes, and I think they got some of the damned old airplanes that we had. And I think we got them out of Panama. God knows where those things are from. Hell, I've been there. You start up one of those things, and I'm not kidding you. You know, they had a reduction gearbox that ran from the motor under your legs and up to a gearbox that turned the prop up in front of you. That thing has to be 8 or 9 feet long. Well, that's a little long. Maybe 7 or 8 feet long. But I've got in those 39s that started up, and you put your foot, after you get it turned over and cranked, put your foot on the damn instrument panel and press to see if you can see the oil pressure come up, because that thing's rocking back and forth like this. That's the truth. Yeah. So that was a monster. I mean, to tell you, an unforgiving, boy, it never forgave you anything. But if you could fly it, you could handle any of the rest of it. So we've checked out in 39. We didn't check out in 39. We checked a bunch of guys out in 39, started forming our own outfits and training up there. And am I telling you about what you want to hear? Okay. We did pretty good up there. The blessing that we had as a group, we got to train as a group and work as a group. There's only 2 outfits, wartime expansion groups I know that got to do that. I imagine they all did subsequently, but I never associated with them. The 354th Fighter Group, its cadre came from Hamilton Field just like we did. Then the 357th Group, it was also formed out of pilots laying around the Bay Area there. The name of that outfit in Hamilton Field was the 328th Fighter Group. And I think everybody ever went through the West Coast any time, at one time or another, was tacked onto that outfit for rations and quarters and frying and all that junk, you know. Whether they ever did any work or not, I don't know. I don't think the CO ever touched an airplane. He quit when they got out of the P-12s. He said, "To hell with it." He didn't like any of them, and I don't think he went down the flight line. But when we got to Tonopah, it was a little different story. We had a group commander who was a fighter pilot, and he wanted to fly, and he wanted to teach people to fly fighter aircraft. And he knew what he was going to do with them if he got a chance. And we got to handpick some guys for squadron COs, and I think he got all the high time guys he could get his hands on the West Coast, of which Anderson and I and Lloyd Hubbard and Ed Hero, some other guys fit that bill. And so we went up there as flight leaders for the squadron. And so we got to train our own men to fly in the way that we wanted to fly the airplanes. And we were very lucky. We got good men. The equipment was horrible. I mean, there's absolutely no signal system of any of it. Now, you won't believe this. We're flying P-39s, all right? In the old days, they used to have a low frequency ranges. They used to have a coffee grinder on the side of the cockpit here. You could kind of diddle around with this thing to get it set to the right frequencies to talk to the tower or something like that. That's wonderful. Except the British have come along and now they have VHF, 4 buttons. You hit any one of these 4 buttons, you can talk to anybody. That works fine. Well, they're trying to convince, we're converting over this. We didn't have anything to convert because we didn't have the first one to begin with. And so now we're going to convert to the RAF 4-band system. You know, hell, we can get crystals, wouldn't work. When you approach that aerodrome, you could call them if you want to and see if it worked. Usually if you thought it was working, you'd get a green light from the tower. And you know that they heard you. So you might not hear them back, but you heard them. And some of them were kind of snotty. They didn't want to talk to you anyway. I remember one time I was going in San Francisco, and I called San Francisco radio, and I said, "This is Army 7612. I want landing instructions for 3 P-39s. Didn't hear nothing. Frisco Tower. This is Army 7612, whatever it is. I want landing instructions for 3 P-39s. Nothing. One more time. Frisco Tower. This is Army 7612. I want landing instructions for 3 P-39s. No answer. Shortly thereafter, in this great cone of silence we're sitting in there, this voice says, "If some person is calling San Francisco radio, we will tell he who has the time bomb with no fuse where to go." Now, he's just sitting up there having fun, you know. He wasn't going to answer. He didn't want to be called Frisco. That's all there was to it. He wanted San Francisco, or he wasn't going to talk to you. Okay. Well, that just shows you an idea of what the communication system was. And particularly on this cross-country, bringing those planes out from Buffalo, the civilian airlines were flying the beams, of course. They had them. They were wonderful instrument, helped them. Except the only way, we didn't have anything like that, so they went down and bought a Motorola radio. It was about 4 inches by 4 inches by maybe 8 inches high. And somehow or other, some very smart guy on the flight line figured out how to make that thing stay on the floor down there. I think what happened, they built a little bit of a metallic holder for it, and you couldn't drill into it, so I think that what they actually did was strap it on there with black plumber's tape so that it would stay there. When you're upside down, it wouldn't fall out, you know. And this thing had low frequencies where you could actually dial in to a beam and fly the beam. Now, of course, you didn't have any directions. You just knew you had an A or an N, or if you happened to be on the beam proper, was solids, you know, and that was it. This was a good deal. And I remember cutting the gauge, going into Gage, Oklahoma. You could hear that damn beam, you know. But that was just an idea how lousy the signal part was. Terrible. And it didn't get much better. Well, we trained at, backing up a little bit, we trained up a bunch of boys at Tonopah. We came down out of Tonopah to the Big Valley, and my squadron was sent to Santa Rosa, California, and one squadron was sent to Hayward, and one squadron went to San Francisco proper. This was the air defense units for the West Coast is what they were, except they're all training outfits, and hell, if anybody come around and pointed a cap at them or shot a gun, hell, they'd all run. So, but one of the interesting things in my experience there outside of there's 1,000 stories about the air, which I'm sure you wouldn't be interested in all of those, but the airfield itself was unique. It was unique in that in those days, I'm quite sure the Air Corps probably built 1,500, 2,000 of them scattered all over the United States. Or probably half of them came off the same plans, or strictly an A-type deal. They just plop them down any place, you know. They got pretty good at that after a while. Then they wanted to find out if they could camouflage it. Well, they had the best camouflage outfits in the world down there at Hollywood. And Christ, they can make anybody look good or bad, indifferent, you name it, and they can hide it where you can't see it. I'll swear to Christ, they came up there and did the job because they told me that they spent $1 million to build the airport and $5 million to camouflage it. Because you fly in or out of that airport, and I did it daily, every day. If I got down below 800 feet, I could see the buildings and the airport, see where I'm supposed to go. Above about 800 feet, you could not recognize the runways. You couldn't tell the administration area. You couldn't recognize any of that kind of stuff. They looked like vineyards. I mean, it was a beautiful job of camouflaging. But they would have to run out there. It would take a little Jeep and run out there with some yellow panels and lay them at the end of the runways, the active runway, and turn that panel over so it was yellow. And then you could see that in case your radio wasn't working, you couldn't hear anything or something like that. You could do it. One time the Navy treated me rather rough, so I never had much to do with the Navy after that. Anyway, I went into North Island. They made me walk all over the damn place. They were very rude. So one time I was in the tower at Santa Rosa, and this Navy plane called in and said, Santa Rosa, I'm having a little trouble finding you. And I said, just keep looking. He found something. I don't know what the hell he found, but there was another aerodrome over there someplace that had a runway. And he said, is this you? I said, oh, hell yes, that's us. Go ahead. He wasn't even close. But this just shows you could be right on top of this damn thing and you couldn't see it, you know. That's all there was to it. So we trained there for quite a while, and then moved from there over into the Big Valley at Oroville. We had done most of our gunnery work. Ground gunnery work was done up in the desert country. The aerial gunnery work was done off the coast of California, where you shoot out over the water more than anything else. You could have shot any place you want to shoot up. In Nevada, you couldn't hit anything. There's nothing you could hurt up there at all, nothing. Even the goats, they're hiding. They ain't gonna show up. So we finally staged from there to Casper, and then we went to we finished up at Casper with a squadron, one in Nebraska, one of them someplace else, I don't know where they were. And I had had a little problem and wasn't actively flying at that time. I was grounded. And so next thing I know, they put us on a train, and the band came down and played east side, west side, so you kind of guess where you're going. Sure as hell, we made it into Camp Shanks, and next thing I know, they put us on the Queen Elizabeth, and that was a wonderful trip. I had 14,000 men on this goddamn boat, and nobody could sleep for over 6 hours because they rotate. I mean, the officer, and we were lucky. Now, I don't say that for you. We had our private mattress. There might be 4 deep or something like this, and there might be 12 to a room. But you got those, the poor GI, and man, they let them sleep and rack them out of there, clean up, put on new linens. Next guy gets to sleep for a while. The mess hall, I'm sure the mess hall must have run 24 hours a day, but you only ate 2 meals a day. I mean, that was it, you know. And but it worked perfect. They're very brilliant people running that thing. They knew if they could find the lousiest weather in the world, it would go to England. All they had to do was stay with it. And so we'd go out of New York and get in the lousy weather and ride it to the Clyde, because it was, that stuff would go right up that funnel till it got to England, and get off the boat. And now we're going to do some flying, combat flying. See, we're in the 9th Air Force. We're in the 9th Air Force for every bit of 30 days, maybe 40 days at the most. And with all due respects to the powers that be, they didn't know a hell of a lot about air fighting, and they sure as hell weren't going to take the chance to learn from those who did know something about it. So we'll just figure it out for ourselves as we go along. So the 51 was a marvelous aircraft at that time, and that's what we were going to get. We were getting the first P-51s that were going to go into the 8th Air Force.
What year was this?
We went over there in November 1943, and from November 1940, we didn't have any airplanes. Matter of fact, I just then got back on flying status, and I had to talk like a Dutch uncle to get that done. And I finally got back on flying status. The only thing I could fly with had a Piper Cub down there. I knew how to fly a Cub. So, but anyway, they told us we're getting 51s, and so they brought in some bright guy. I forgot what his name was. I think his name was George. Went over to Blackpool or wherever the place was over there and picked them up. I went over there to check and see, and they were coming in on crates over there. And I needed to fly in time anyway, so that was the purpose of doing it. So I'd get paid. If I didn't fly, I was going to lose a bunch of pay. And but this guy George is supposed to have known something about, had flown a P-51 in the United States. And so I think we managed to get 2 or 3 around there, you know. And so I think my squadron might have had 2, and the other squadrons were all on the same base. And we were at Raiden Woods was the name of the base that we were at. They all had numbers, but that was the name for it. It was up near Colchester, England. And so everybody checked out in the 51. We had 20 some odd pilots assigned to the squadron at that time. We were full strength as far as flying personnel went. And so we started, everybody getting checked out in the 51, and hell, checking out, and that thing was the easiest damn thing you ever saw. And God, it was wonderful. The only thing different was, of course, we were coming out of a tricycle gear with 39, you see, and everybody's used to sitting up there with the windows rolled down, their arms sticking out there, hat on the back of the head, smiling, you know, just going down the street, just having fun, you know. And here's this thing, you cannot see anything out the front of it. Guys, you're S-ing all over the place, you're going to hurt somebody if you don't, you know. But that was the only disadvantage that aircraft had that I knew about at that time, is that it was difficult to see on the ground. But once you get her squared away and start down the runway and hold her straight, she's a perfect little lady. She doesn't turn around and try to bite you or kick you in the tail end or anything like that. If that motor turns over, she'll behave herself. And away she went, you know. So nobody had any trouble checking out in the 51s. And Christ said, we started flying operations. We went into operations in 44, in February 44. We got there just about in time for the 8th Air Force is starting to beef up, 9th Air Force is beefing up. They're going to start on destroy the German Air Force is what they want. They didn't tell us this, but that's what they were trying to do. And so we got in, we did basically escort work and for the 8th Fighter Command. And the interesting thing was that the politics involved in getting the P-51 into action is disgraceful if you stop and think about it, really. That poor old airplane was, I don't know what the hell they ever designed it for. I never asked anybody. I've talked to some of those guys out there. I know some of them. What their thinking was when they designed the aircraft, because we use it for every goddamn thing except for what they built it for. They started out, they're going to use it for a dive bomber in Italy. It wouldn't dive bomb nothing, okay? They put an Allison engine in there, and Allison's killed more damn people than the Germans did. It's a disgrace as an engine, and always was. And so some guy put a Rolls-Royce Merlin in there. Boy, it worked pretty good. The first thing you know, you got the finest air fighting airplane of World War II. It's put together by a bunch of nuts. One guy builds a motor, another guy builds it. The guns don't fit right and all this junk. You name it. Everything was wrong. But when they got all through with it, they lucked into the finest escort fighter in World War II. And the only thing wrong with it, I swear to God, it could go further than a B-17 any day. They could drop their bombs and go home. We're still with them. We've been there before they got there. We're there after they leave. So I can't remember of any place that we ever ran out of gas. That goddamn thing had gas coming out the pitot tube. I swear to God it did. To make matters worse, they modified it and put a 90-gallon fuselage tank in it. Before we had Bs to start with, and the Bs it was a good aerodynamic airplane. There was nothing wrong with that at all. The only thing wrong with the Baker B was that the guns were in the wings. They were canted because of the cord of the wing was so thin that 50 caliber could not sit up straight. So they just tilted it over. Well, that's fine as long as you don't. As you think about it, those ammo trays that come up and carry the bullets to go up and feed the guns have to come from the top down. Okay, and you get a little G stress on that airplane. You're going to pull some G's in there, and you try to shoot those guns. They're going to shoot for a little while and then they quit. They jam. Every goddamn one of them is gone. But the nice thing about it, they'll jam differently. You might lose the outboards and then the inboard or something like that, or maybe all on this side, none on this side. But they will jam on you so that when you get ready to shoot somebody, well, the probability is you may or may not have a set of guns that are going to stay with you for very long. And that was a disadvantage. And those little things, you know, a little thing like that, and a little thing like, hell, you run out of oxygen. So you went out, you tried to keep below, I think that supercharger kicked in around about, variable, about 17,000 feet. It had a two-stage blower on it. It would kick in, low blower, it would go out, high blower would come in at around 17,000. That'd stay with you to as high as you wanted to fly that damn thing. I know, believe me. And but you use more oxygen, so that we would go in on penetration, restrict our elevation because the oxygen bottle didn't have enough oxygen in it for us to get there, fly the mission, get with the bombers, turn around, fly back, and have enough oxygen. No, hell no. You get to use oxygen when you get to the target, damn it. So when you're about halfway in there, all of a sudden you start climbing on the old balsa, kick it, and you can feel that. If you ever fly a 51, when that two-stage blower kicks in, it'll wiggle the seat on you. It'll shake it just like this, you know. And when you first go, and they don't all kick in at the same time. Hell, it's an aneroid system that kicks it. So, and they're not that sensitive, you know. And so you'll see an airplane over here jerk, and this one over here starts jerking, and one down the middle starts. You can just see what's happening. Those blowers are starting to kick in, you know. And the old man, whoever's leading the damn thing, is getting us up there. We're getting ready to make contact. We're about due for rendezvous with the bombers anyway. And so that takes us on up. That's where we're going to use the oxygen. And we didn't need a hell of a bunch coming back, you know, because if you want to, you can drop down. Hell, you're going to do some deck work or something like that on the way home. So that's what we did. And what I started to say about I got twisted off there talking about the politics. The politics of designing the power plant for the engine, that was a political problem. It had to be straightened out. The politics of its employment, whether it was going to go to the 9th Air Force or the 8th Air Force. What was the purpose of the 9th Air Force? It sure as hell wasn't strategic bombing. If it was strategic bombing, it's damn well hidden with a bunch of B-26s. They ain't going very far. So what are you going to do? It's a ground support outfit. Fine. Then what do you want the longest range fighter assigned to a ground outfit for? Huh? You want something that's going to be able to take a beating and get home. I'd like to have a Jug or a P-38. Be the logical thing. No, the politics of getting that group back into the 8th Air Force, and they never did get the 354th back, which is the primary outfit who took the first ones in there. They were flying 51s in December of 43. They flew about 2 weeks in December of 43, and they were the first ones. And they were a 9th Air Force outfit doing work for the 8th Bomber Command. And I knew a lot of those guys. They're damn good pilots, damn fine men too. They owe an awful lot to those guys. They were worse than we were. And they were learning harder than we were learning. They didn't tell us nothing. We sent some guys down there to fly with them, and hell, we ended up, one of my best friends got killed trying to fly with them. I didn't have any use for those guys. They're fine in the air and everything like that, you know. But I got kind of mad because I figured that was unnecessary, and it was unnecessary that you get killed. But that's war, you know, those things happen. So the two pioneer groups that brought the 51s over there, one went to the 9th, one went to the 8th, and our job basically was to escort bombers for the bombing targets selected. Basically, they're all German, and a few, and every once in a while they go in deep France, not too often. And been to Posen, Poland. Hell, I've gone in there and used Berlin as a checkpoint on the way in and come up and fly the Baltic coming out, because they don't put too many anti-aircraft guns down in the middle of the Baltic Ocean. So you can get out of there all right. And so that's what we did with basically escort work. And we were lousy at it to start with. And we stayed lousy for politics. Again, more another reason. If you have an opportunity to read the literature or just talk to the guys, the German fighter pilots hated the German bomber command because Goering welded them to that bomber command. He made, during the Battle of Britain, those guys, they knew what they were doing. They're sharp. Don't kid yourself. They had good equipment. They knew what they wanted to do. They did not want to sit in the lap of that goddamn truck driver down there. No, they wanted to be out and move, use the airplane the way it was built. And they said, no, you keep it right there. Well, that's what we were doing. We were sitting right there by that bomber command. Just as long as he could see you sitting off his wingtip out there, he thought you were doing him some good. You really weren't. The only good you were doing, indirect success might be counted. If the Germans saw you, they'd go hunt up some other place where you weren't and attack down there. Now, that might be the contribution you made that day. Whereas had you been 4 miles or 5 miles away from him and 5,000 feet above him and off to the side someplace, you might have latched onto a swarm of those guys while they were working themselves up and getting in a position to make their run. Then you'd clean house and get them long before they get to those bombers. And that's what you'd like to do. It's what you wanted to do. But you didn't have that freedom of action when we first went in there. As a matter of fact, we were restricted. You couldn't go below 18,000. They said, don't chase anything below 18,000 feet and get back up to the bombers. So these were things you had to overcome, and I think my personal thinking is that when I never heard too much from anybody I had great respect for as a fighter pilot, because they were all working down to group levels. I don't know who their operations were in fighter. I don't even know if they had any. They might have had them. If they did, they never opened their mouth, which was probably very good. They got promoted a bunch. But they kept their mouth shut and they never said a word, so you're going to do what the Bomber Command wanted done anyway. And I think when Doolittle took over, he'd come out of North Africa, he'd been down to Italy, and he knew what his job was, to get that German Air Force destroyed as quick as he could. And one way to do that, and the only way to do it, make them fight. And so that's what he did. There was no more of that breaking off at 18,000 feet. And you don't have to sit on the bombers there, as long as you can give area support, get in there, protect them in case of attack. He didn't come right out and say this. Our group commanders didn't say it either, but that's what we started doing. You started ranging out away from the bombers. Because hell, that's just like bait in a pond. Hell, the damn fish are going to go after that bait down there, and you want the fish, so you sit there with a net someplace and get them before they can get to the bait, if that's what you're trying to do. And so that's how it worked out. But as far as the developments of aviation in the wartime is concerned, we were absolutely horrible at it. Don't kid yourself. They'll tell you we had the best of this, the best of that. That's not true. I'm quite sure that most of our military personnel were all well educated on the Civil War battles. How do you win it? You win it with food and men and animals, a lot of it, and equipment. Don't worry about anything else. You get a whole bunch of horses to pull the goddamn artillery up there, blow the damn thing up, send a bunch of people in there, and you'll win the war. And this is about the philosophy that they operated with. it's interesting to watch how other people go about doing things. The Germans, they'll sit and plan something for quite a while, but they're not afraid to take the rough approach if they have to, but they would much prefer to have a subtle approach. The British always have a subtle approach because they don't like casualties. I think they believe it. No, taking casualties, that's for somebody else, you know. And a perfectly good example, hell, they had a wonderful aircraft. Thank God they let us have it. Spitfire. They put the 31st Group into Spitz down in North Africa. And a good friend of mine flew him. And hell, I guess if he hadn't had that Spit, he wouldn't be around. He's still around, too. He's a hell of a fine man. But it was a wonderful airplane. I think it had 86 gallons of gasoline the first time I saw that damn thing. Someplace in there, it seems to me that the United States Air Force took one of them and converted it and did photo reconnaissance work over Berlin in the daytime with it. And the last time I saw Spitfire, it had 86 gallons of gasoline in it. I think it would handle that English Channel and probably the first 50 or 75 miles of Europe in pretty good shape. And it was built for the air defense of Great Britain, and by God, that's what it's going to do. It will defend Great Britain. Let those goddamn Yanks go over there and fight those Krauts. We will defend Great Britain. Now, and this was wonderful. You see, somebody takes their airplane and puts a bunch of gas in it, show them how far you can go, where the fight is. Well, that's interesting, but we're going to stay right here and defend this goddamn island. And that's what they did. And I can't blame them because, you know, they'd had their tough battles. They didn't have to go out hunting for any. They'd had them in their own backyard. So I'm not being critical of them. I'm just telling you this is the way it was. They don't like to take a bunch of casualties. And I guess it's understandable. You wiped out, they wiped out several generations in that First World War and they never got over it. French are the same way. So it's just the approach to things. We were very heavy-handed with us. Now imagine if you talk to some guys that worked in China, they probably fought very much there just about like the Germans did in Germany proper. In other words, they went when they had things in their favor. And they had a very good old-time fighter pilot up there running that thing. And he knew what the hell their thinking was. He knew how to do it. And he wasn't going to waste them. There'll be no wastage. I don't imagine casualties bothered him. He expected to lose some. We all do. I mean, you're going to take the casualties. That's all there is to it. But you don't like to see dumb, stupid casualties acquired. I mean, it's sickening. It really is. I remember one time I was on a mission. We got a very fine group commander. The group commander we went over with was transferred out of our group after he flew one combat mission, I believe. And we had a new group commander the next day. This guy had a walrus mustache, and he's a full bird colonel. He's got a little wreath around that star, so he's been around there a while. And this guy likes to fly airplanes. And this guy went out and climbed in a 51 and led the mission. That was when he checked himself out in the 51. He wasn't much interested in taxiing it around and flying around local. His first mission was a combat leadership mission. His name was Russ Spicer. He ended up commanding general of the 17th Air Force in Germany. And he was, boy, he was a horse, I mean to tell you. And I had nothing but absolute admiration for him. And come to find out, these are things you learn later on, you don't know them at the time. Apparently he was chief of staff of one of the fighter wings in England. I know which one, I know who the CO was too. But he was just licking his chops trying to figure out how in the hell I'm going to get into this war, and I want to get in there in a 51, and boy, here it was, handed to him on a silver platter, man. I think Spicer, if I remember right, I don't think Russ Spicer flew 15 missions and shot down 6 or 8 airplanes. He was, I mean, he was a horse. He went for it all the time, and a fine man, too. He was interested in his people and things like that. Well, those kind of guys didn't have an awful lot to do with saying, what you're going to be doing that day until they get you in the air. And once they get you in the air, then that's the big difference. You can talk all you want to and make all the plans and everything like that, but how the operation is conducted in the air is where the real meat of the shows up on the bone. And we were fortunate in having two very excellent, we had others that are equally as good, we had two excellent combat leaders. That's what I call them. Somebody else call them anything you want to. The operations officer for the group, or a squadron commander, or the deputy commander, anything like that. These men, their job was that they were good at taking a large number of men in combat and being successful with them. They'd shoot down more than they lost, and most of the time they would accomplish their objectives that they set out. I think, you know, you've seen these grading systems in the literature, run 97, 98% completion ratios of their what they were ordered to do. They complete them 98% of the time, 97%. These are truly remarkable figures. You stop and think about it, and you owe a lot of it to those kind of men that led like that. And I was lucky. I had, and Spicer was one of those kind of men too, and so was Erwin Dregney, and a very good friend of mine, Tommy Hayes. You're not going to beat them. That's all there is to it. Once upon a time, I got kind of interested in that stuff. I figured, well, how in the hell do you do this stuff, you know? And, you read a little military history and everything. And I was interested one time. I saw an article that was written. Somebody had inquired as to Lord Nelson under what circumstances he would court-martial a captain of the British fleet. And he said, as long as the captain brings his guns to bear upon the enemy, he will never be court-martialed. And I think Dregney and Tommy Hayes must have read that long before I did, because their idea was that we may not have the tactical advantage in this engagement, but we are going to engage. And this seems to work. It worked very damn good. He's going to attack hell. They're up there. They're attacking us. We don't have, all we have to do is wait. So I need to step down. Can we shut this down for a minute, please? Am I giving you the information? All right. As far as the combat end of the thing of my career went, I flew, in those days, I flew 300 hours of combat. The tour was started out was restricted to 25 hours for the bombers, 25 missions, pardon me. And they thought the fighter pilots were going to fly 25 missions. Well, that ain't going to work because time ratio is entirely lopsided, and fighter pilots would be coming out with very little time, bomber pilots with a lot of time. So they set it up to go to 150 hours originally. And we got about 100 hours under our belt, and some guy from Fighter Command came down and said, what do you think of a 300-hour tour? And one of the smart guys looked at him and said, well, let's see, I've got about 100 hours, and we've had 50% casualties. If you show me how I can get to 300 and stay alive, I'm all for it. If it didn't make a damn bit of difference, you're going to do the 300. That's it. So we went to 300 hours, and I flew 77 missions getting to 300 hours. And our average mission would probably be about 3.5 to 4 hours, although during the invasion, hell, I flew one 7-hour and some 7 hours, 10 minutes, 7 hours, 50 minutes, I don't know what it was, night flying. We took off at night, night operations. And it was quite a fiasco. And I think in that period of time, 24-hour period, I flew 12 hours and 30 minutes, several different missions. Then came back and landed and dive bombing and strafing for 2 weeks thereafter. You know, you just came in, gassed up, and loaded up your bombs, take back out, and go after it. So those were a lot of missions flown. Those were short time, but those escort missions were usually about 4 hours. And then when I got back to the States, I came back, I finished mine, and I went up to North England as a squadron commander, and then I came back to the States in 1944. I went over in November 43. I'm back in November 44, and they asked me what I wanted to do. I said I want to go to the West Coast and fly P-39s because I knew that everybody hated them out there. They said fine. They sent me to Florida to fly P-40s, and the only reason I got out of there, I lost $165 in a crap game to the squadron CO, and he wanted to get paid, and I said I want to transfer. And he said, I want to get paid. I said, I want to transfer. He said, I got you. Coming up. Your money's on the table. So I bought my way out of that place. I got the best deal out of it you ever saw in your life. I was transferred to Barksdale Air Force Base, an old permanent base in Shreveport. And I was operations officer for the staging for action in the South Pacific. No good?
No good.
No good.
Do it one more time.
You want to check this?
We're okay now.
Okay now? We're going to go again.
We're fine.
Okay. The function of the Japanese Air Force at Barksdale was to simulate combat conditions for the B-29s that were finishing up their phase training prior to going to the South Pacific and bombing the Empire. So we had a good deal. They didn't know a damn thing about fighters, and they didn't want to learn anything about fighters. And most of their instructor pilots were old boys come out of combat out of Europe, basically. And so I started out, we had P-51 Bakers and Charlies, which are the same airplane, different serial numbers. And then we got some 51 Dogs, and then I got some P-63s, which nobody knew how to fly. Whenever they come run down there and say, anybody fly? I can fly. So about the only thing you had to do out of safety was to send the damn plane down and have it checked by weights and balance. Because if the center of gravity in that airplane is not in the right place, it's going to flat spin right into the ground after it gets through tumbling around like a fish on the end of a line. That's just what it'll do. Now, the engineering officers at, I mean, not the engineering officers, but the engineering pilots at Bell Aircraft said it won't do this, but I've seen it done in the air. And you can do all kinds of things with that damn thing. And they say you can't tumble it. Well, you can. Both, I know the 39 will tumble. I never tried to tumble a 63. That's enough of that. Anyway, that was a good deal. And I had a lot of fun down there and flew a lot. And that was really the beautiful part of it. You can imagine going to the flight line, take your pick of what you wanted to fly that day. And so then from there I was transferred to Wright Field at Dayton, Ohio. And I was assigned as a test pilot to in Patterson, Accelerated Service Test Section. And we had some nice people around there at that time. And most of the airplanes I flew up there were just average run-of-the-mill things, except I was flying a P-47N Nellie, which was designed to go to the Empire. And it had an automatic pilot in it. It was the first time I ever saw an automatic pilot in my life, let alone in a fighter. I'll take that back. I did see automatic pilot in a C-47 because I checked out in anything that was laying around that I have a chance to fly, I'd go fly. Checked out B-25s, C-47s, and took instrument work in B-17 of all things. And but anyway, I was stuck basically with fighters. I like fighters. It's good. And I was part of the outfit that was testing the XP-82, which somebody will say, what in the hell is a P-82? Well, it's two P-51s bolted together is what it is. And I asked the boy, I said, why are we building this thing? Because I was flying. I said, why are we building this? What are we going to do with it? He said, you want me to tell you the truth? I said, yes, please. He said, we're building that so we keep people employed until we get the production lines ready for the F-86. And I said, well, hell, that makes sense because this airplane's worthless. The only thing that airplane was good for, it would be an excellent training aircraft for instrument work in fighters, and it would be a good instructing airplane for aero gunnery. Other than that, it was worthless. And that's exactly what they did with it. They took it out and declared it to be an all-weather interceptor fighter, and some poor bastards got stuck flying it. So then that more or less culminated my career up there. Let's see, when I was up at Wright, we didn't have very many of my guys around there. One of them, Chuck Yeager, was working up there. He was over at Wright, and I was over at Wright Pat. And let's see, as far as I was going to talk about some personnel, and I think I've discussed most of them. We had Spicer and Tommy Hayes, Ernest Dregnick, and Bud Anderson, and Chuck Yeager. Matter of fact, Chuck Yeager got shot down flying with me, so he hadn't forgiven me to this day for that. So these are some rather prominent people there. There's Pete Peterson and Kit Carson and Johnny England. These are all pretty high-ranking aces. And now about the group itself, the 357 Fighter Group was a pretty prominent group. It had a remarkably good combat record and contributed a very large number of aces to the rolls of 8th Air Force. And it gained a little respect from the Germans to where they hung a name on it, and they called it the Yoxford Boys, Y-O-X-F-O-R-D, named for a very small town most of us did not even know existed, right not too far from the airport, because the biggest town we had was a town named Leiston, L-E-I-S-T-O-N. Leiston was only about a mile, and I think Yoxford was a mile and a half. It was just two crossroads out there. They just picked the wrong town. So that's the way those things work. Now, in regard to the type of actual mission work itself, when you're doing bomber escort work, you usually fall in two categories, three categories actually. It's penetration, is supporting the bombers on the way in. Target area support, which is the actual place where is going to be bombed. And then the third phase is the withdrawal. And most of the penetration and withdrawal work was done by shorter ranged aircraft, which was, in that theater, would be the P-47s and sometimes the 38s. And then the target area support, that was at the end of the whip out there, was done by the 51s and some 38s if they could make it in there. But they had a kind of a tough time over there because of the weather. Now, and I'd like to make a couple of remarks about the weather. The weather was atrocious. I mean to tell you, if you read much in the literature of the air war of Europe, you will find, other than the Mediterranean theater, that I think the weather constituted the greatest enemy of all the participants, whether they be German, British, Americans. Didn't make any difference. We probably lost more people because of weather than anything else. And that coupled into the fact we didn't have anything in the way of reliable navigation aids to get back with meant that you were really on the seat of your pants all the way in, and that's the way it worked out. I've come in there with a 500-foot ceiling letting down on instruments through that crap, and you didn't know where in the hell you were. You just hoped the last 500 feet wasn't made out of rocks. That's all. Well, let's see. I spoke to you about some needless casualties I mentioned in there. Sometimes you can't do anything about it. There's absolutely nothing you can do. At least you don't think you can. I couldn't, anyway. But I remember one mission in particular, we flew the unusual and unique weather in that the clouds were 10/10 under us. But there was a wispy upper layer that was almost had a knife edge on one side of it. And down below to that was solid undercast 10/10 at about 20,000 feet. And then the wispy stuff started in almost a sheer wall of it. It came on up. We were on top of it at 32, 33,000. And Russ Spicer was leading the mission. I was flying there with him. And you could look down and you could see vertically down to the undercast, but you could not see horizontally into it. And here came the 17s, and they were driving in, and they were above the lower deck, but they were not above that wispy stuff. They couldn't, there's no way they could get above it. And they went into that stuff and made the most beautiful 180-degree procedure turn you ever saw, and I could see them. And I knew what was going to happen. When they get through with that turn, they're going to be going back into that bomber stream head on. And sure as hell, that's just exactly what happened. And they had B-17s plowing into each other around there. I'll bet they lost 8 or 10 airplanes in that fiasco. And I couldn't say anything. Hell, I'm on radio silence. I'm on whatever channel I'm supposed to be on, B channel, combat channel. And the only channel that talks to the bombers is A channel, which is the group commander's wingman, or the group commander. He can talk to them. But hell, I can't say a damn word. And just watch them run together, I guess. You know, it's a terrible thing. And another dumb casualty. One time we went to pick up the, we're supposed to pick up the bombers north of the Kiel Canal up in, well, they're going in to make a penetration run down the Baltic and then turn and come in Berlin or wherever in the hell they're going. And instead of that, we make rendezvous with them a full hour and a half ahead of time. And there's one little piece of land sticks up out there. It's called Heligoland Blight. And I don't think the damn thing is a half-mile square, but it sticks up out of the ocean. Well, that is a half-a-mile square of solid anti-aircraft fire sitting there for anybody dumb enough to get close to it. I sat there and watched the 8th Bomber Command start out right across that thing. And you could see it, and you knew what was going to be coming at you. And sure as hell, I saw them shoot down at least one bomber, and maybe more than one, before somebody broke that column and moved it off. Hell, you didn't have to move over there a quarter of a mile, and they wouldn't hit you. Couldn't hit you. So these kind of things stick in your mind because they're unnecessary. You can accept the casualties. You know, it's kind of like going to the bank. You don't mind paying the bank note as long as you're making money. You can walk in the bank, everything's all right. You got to make. It's the guy that don't walk in the bank that he don't think much of it. Now that's about takes care of that unnecessary stuff. About those bombers crashing together, it brings up a point that I've always liked to kind of stress on something like this, and I've done a little of this, so nothing new to me. But I think you don't give the bomber boys enough credit for what they do. They had to demonstrate a different type of courage than these damn Jake-legged fighter pilots. Hell, fighter pilot, if things get rough or anything, nobody criticizes him if he pulls the airplane over a little bit, or as long as he doesn't run off or something like that. The flight can move over, move down, move up. Not the bomber boys. They have to sit there and just take it and take it and take it. And when they turn off of that IP, that's their initial point, on their bomb run up to deliver those bombs where they're going to go, you can't stop them. I've never seen them stopped. And I've never seen them turn because of enemy opposition. And I've seen that flak out there, blacker than that coat hanging right over there. And you could practically walk on it. And by God, it's going off, and they just drive right on through that stuff. Now, that takes a very brave group, as far as I'm concerned. Because I'm sitting up here about 1,000 feet above it watching it. So, but I thought you might find that of interest. And I have nothing else to add to it. My career terminated in about 46. I left the service and went back to civilian life, and then went to work and make a living.
What is today's date?
What is what?
Today's date.
Date of today? Let's have about 3/15/96. Okay. Is that close enough?